Shankaram Lokashankaram Shankaram Shankaracharyam Keshavam Badarayanam Sutrabhashakritau Vande Bhagavantau Punah Punaha Ishvaro Gururatmeti Murtibheda Vibhagine Vyomavat Dehaya Dakshinamurtaye Namaha Gukarastvandakaro Vai Rukarastvanivartakaha Andakara Nirodhitvat Gururitya Vidhiyate Sadashivasamarambham Shankaracharya Madhyamam Asmadacharya Paryantam Vande Guru Paramparam. Om Sahana Bhavatu Sahanau Bhunaktu Sahaviryam Karavavahai Tejasvinavadhitamastu ma vidvishavahai. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Om Bhadram Karnebhih Shrunuyama Devaah Bhadram Pashyemakshabhiryajatraah Sthirairangai Istuštuvagum Sastanubhih Vyashemate Vahitanyadayuh Swasti na Indro Vriddhashravah Swasti na Pusha Vishwavedah Swasti na Starksho Arishtanemihi Swasti no Brihaspatir Dadhatu. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. So let's chant verses number 11 and 12. Number 11. Atmanam aranim kritva pranavam cha uttariyanam uttararnim jnananimartana abhyasat pasham dahati panditaha. Number 12. Sa eva maya parimohitatma Shariram asthaya karoti sarvam striyan panadi vichitra bhogaihi sa eva jagrat paritriptimeti. One more time. Sa eva maya parimohitatma shariram asthaya karoti sarvam Striyan panadi vichitra bhogaihi sa eva jagrat paritriptimeti. Okay, so we saw last time the process of waking up from this dreamlike existence. So what do you mean by dreamlike existence? The dreamlike existence is that it is pretty much the same as the dream that you and I go through every night, which is a very remarkable thing if you see how the manufacturing of the dream is done by the Ishvara. I think one of the aspects is why. So all these questions need to be really asked in our mind. That why am I the way I am? What's going on? And the more we ask questions, the more we inquire in a very reasonable manner, the better off we are about our own joy and happiness. And so one of the aspects is, what is the purpose of the dream? How does it, what does that do for me? So there are some surfacey kind of analysis which will say that it relieves certain pressures from you that otherwise you cannot bring into your conscious mind during the day. So there is some validity to that. We don't disagree with that. There is a certain truth to the fact that it becomes like a safety valve because we have three levels of our thoughts: unconscious, subconscious, and conscious. And so unconsciously we are suppressing some subconscious thoughts that are too difficult for us to process. And so that allows our dream to surface so it relieves a certain pressure. Okay. Not untrue, but not the real significance. This is what we have to understand. The real significance of our dream, this is how Ishvara, God, decided to manufacture the human being. And it's interesting how, as we will study it more, that there are three different ways that we live on our life every day. And one of them is the dream. So the question is, why the dream? One, of course, is the waking, then the dream, and the deep sleep state. So why the dream? And the real reason, as our Shastra tells us, because we have to really look at insights from the Shastra. Shastra means one which is intended to help us. And the Shastra which is not made by human beings but by Parameshwara himself. So there we can see that the dream is a way for us to gain complete freedom in our life. What? One can ask, how does that dream give us complete freedom in our life? How is that possible? It is because, as we will study in the main topic of today's class, which is verse number 12, which is, how is it that we, as Shastra tells us, that you are immortal, then how come I feel mortal? The Shastra tells us you are infinite. How is it that I find finite? That I feel finite? The Shastra says you are independent. I don't feel independent. I feel very dependent. So all these kinds of opposite viewpoints that naturally come into our lives. Why is that? How does that happen? So to understand that, the dream plays a very important part. And the fact that the dream plays an important part in answering why is it that I feel different from what I am. This is what the Shastra says, that the way you feel about yourself is really not the way you are. You have a wrong impression about yourself. What? What kind of how can that be? There, in answering that question, the dream becomes a very important hint. It's a hint. Because I cannot pursue something until some very strong hints are given to me. And the dream is a very important hint. You know, there was the story that I think I told Swami Maheshananji had shown the story that in a village, one day this man who had a cow, because to own a cow in the villages is a very big thing. It's a major asset. This poor man doesn't have cars and houses and television, but a cow. And the cow is very useful because it gives milk. It can give create other calves and so on and so forth. It's a very, very beautiful animal and very highly regarded as you know, by the Hindu people. So he had his cow. One day he woke up in the morning and the cow was gone. And he said, "What? Where did it go?" And he searched around and he couldn't find it. Because, he usually ties the cow at night time so that it doesn't run away for two places. Gone. Tie was also gone and the cow was gone. So he rushes over to the local, kind of like a policeman. Not quite sure how villages have police people in India, small villages, what the mechanism is to police. But anyway, let's assume that he went to the local policeman and said, "Sir, my cow has been stolen." So the policeman says, "Really? Let's go look at it." So fortunately, on those days, it was a rainy season and the ground was very wet. And the policeman said, "Aha, let us trace the hoof marks of your cow. And it would lead us to where it went." He says, "You are very fortunate that the ground is wet and the hoof marks actually leave their marks on the ground." So the person says, "Okay, he says, "I've done this before, so follow me." So he says, "Okay, we'll follow you." So the policeman carefully looked at where the cow was going, and he also saw some other footsteps who was leading it, and it finally went to one side of the village where the cow was found to be tied. And they arrested this person for thievery. So this is what is called a strong hint. In Sanskritam, it is called lingam. So Shiva lingam, that is exactly what it is. It's a strong hint. So in that manner, the dream is a very strong hint given by Parameshwara to us to pursue total freedom. And it says that, listen, your answer to how is it that I feel mortal and if I am immortal can be found in the analysis of the dream. You analyze the dream and you will find the answer. How? Because the dream is an experience which appears to be real when it is not. Really, I wake up in the morning and I'm really amazed how I have had such realistic experiences. I'm really, I'm amazed at it. That in my mind, I could come up with some detailed scenarios that I'm looking for something and then I cannot find it, so then I have to ask people around, and who I ask and how, all those kinds of details, very intricate details. And sometimes I really wake up in the morning more tired than I went to sleep with. And I often wonder, how is that possible? The sleep is supposed to be, deep sleep, of course, is uh, very relaxing and so on. But we don't have deep sleep throughout the night. We have a lot of dreams. And what I find is that my mind is so busy in coping up with the experiences of the dream that sometimes in the morning I wake up more less tired or more tired than I went to sleep sometimes. And fortunately, it just doesn't take me very long to sort of get rid of all of that. As you know, we all do that, I'm sure. You can just take some deep breaths, just think, close your eyes, and pretty soon your mind just gets rid of all of the effects of the thinking during the dream and so on. What I'm saying is that the dream was so real, amazing. So the Shastra says, listen, can I tell you something? Your waking state is almost the same as the dream. And so you feel mortal even though you are immortal, because it is like a covering of the immortality by your clinging to some false identity. This is it. Doesn't appear, and the thing is that I will not be as persuaded by this line of thinking except the example of the dream. This is why a dream is really manufactured. Believe it or not, I think, I'm just saying this from Shastric viewpoint, not just mine. The dream is specifically meant for the advancement of Vedantic thinking. Until then, it is kind of like useless. It becomes useful only when you begin to unravel the mystery about yourself. And so this is it, because otherwise we would have a very hard time convincing ourselves. How is that possible? So I mentioned that as an important, as you will see in your own, you should see in your own quest as a student of Vedanta, that it isn't until you start to compare and contrast the waking state and the dream state. And all I'm just saying is that this is where the advanced thinking really should take place. We went through this Mandukya Upanishad with Karika, which is one of the most important Upanishad that is. We studied that for like 2 years, all from the standpoint of this comparison between dream and the waking state. The interesting thing is that we dismiss the comparison between the dream and the waking state based on certain conclusions that the dream is not to be repeated. Once you have a dream, then it doesn't, it's very possible sometimes, if a person is not well, you can have recurring dreams during the same night, kind of like a nightmare. It often happens if a person has fever or some other disease, temporary disease. Children have recurring nightmares many times. So except for that, the dream really doesn't reoccur. Each dream is unique and transitory. We understand that. It's transitory and so on, and it doesn't come back. So it doesn't appear to be very real when you wake up from it. While you're dreaming, you don't have this feeling. You don't say this is going to disappear. No. You have the same experience as you would as you were awake while you are in the dream. But later on, you can dismiss it and saying, that something happened and it's gone. But that's not true of our waking. Because if you had something going on the previous day, that going on is continued today and will continue more or less tomorrow. You have the same people that you're interacting with. Same spouses and children and friends and neighbors and so on and so forth. So there is a sort of a sense of continuity which is there in the waking state, which is not there in the dream state. As a result of that, you don't progress very much in trying to equate the two. We said, no, those are completely different things altogether. So the Shastra says, don't be so hasty in dismissing the veracity and the validity of the Jagrat Avastha, of the waking state, as very similar to a dream state. Don't be so hasty in dismissing it. So we ask, why not? What should I do? So there it says, Shastra says that what makes the waking state appear to be more real is the fact that your impressions about the things on a given day are reinforced much more powerfully than in the dream. And how does that happen? Because you do not have a gross body in the dream to tether you to a one place where you can repeat the same ideas over and over again. So it has nothing to do with any fundamental difference between them. All it is a question of quantity. Because you are repeating the same thought over and over again, therefore it appears to be really real. That's all. It is just It might take a little longer time to disappear. Exactly what happens. Really speaking, in some way, as we will study, we will look into this in more detail. So this is what happens. So really, in some ways, each life, each span of life is like a dream. How is that? What do you mean by each span of life? So because you see, if you look at a dream, in the dream, you manufacture a body for yourself called the dream body. You do. So you are the person who is in the dream, who is interacting with other characters in the dream. You're talking to them, you are responding to them, and these are your own manufactured characters. You assign a body to people. You assign the sounds to people. You assign a body to yourself in the dream and a sound of yourself in the dream. This is a manufactured body. The difference between the manufactured body in the dream and the manufactured body in the waking state is that the manufactured body in the waking state is done with a lot of partnership help of Ishvara. What do you mean by lot of partnership and help? Because you and I in our previous life designed our next life, our next dream as though. So even though in the dream you and I manufacture something, but it is done instantaneously, rather haphazardly, not very well, and doesn't last very well. The impressions, so this is where the word vasanas come in very handy. So vasana means the impressions left over by your previous experiences. Just like the smell of onions, if you keep on cutting onions, for 3 or 4 onions, it gets seeped into your own hands. Even after you wash it a couple of times, the smell of onions are still there. It's called vasana. So similarly, the leftover impressions from the previous experiences is called vasana. So in a dream, the vasanas are very weak, not very strong. It's like you cut maybe just a quarter of an onion, and it doesn't have enough time to really seep into your skin. So there's a little bit of vasana, but not much. But suppose you've been, you're part of some kind of an organized group, and you are entrusted with cutting 20, 25, 30 onions. That's your, somehow the job came to you and you were supposed to do that. After cutting 30 onions, just by simply washing your hands once, it's not going to go away. Garlic is the same thing. Garlic is even more powerful of a vasana than the onions. And so the vasanas from onions and garlic will stay with you for a long time. So it's really a question of strength rather than any fundamental difference between the dream and the waking state. So in the waking state was designed by you in consultation with Ishvara. The other way around, it was designed by Ishvara in consultations with you, or exactly what the next dream is going to be like. And you say, and we do this every day, from our likes and dislikes, we feel this is what I want to do. I wish I was be like this. I don't think anybody, I don't believe, although it's very possible somebody looks at Trump and said, this is what I want to be. If you keep on really wishing for the next life to be for you to become the Trump, you will become something like a Trump. And so similarly, other people look at Mahatmas and say, I wish I could be like that. And all those are all taken into account, everything that you want to do. And so our life is manufactured much more carefully, in a much more structured. And then of course, so that's part of it. In the case of the dream, your bodies are manufactured by your mind from the vasanas left over from the previous experiences. But in the waking state, your body is manufactured by Ishvara to last for quite a while, even though it's undergoing changes and so on and so forth, but it stays together as the recipient of all the experiences for a number of years. But finally it ends. Finally it ends, and by that the long dream also ends. The long dream means you get married, you're married for a long time, you have children, you have jobs, you have parents, and for a long time, but it all ends. It all ends. Your parents are gone, spouses go, children go, friends go. Everything is gone. You're no longer the recipient of experiences as part of that life. Then you start all over again. Manufacture a new body based on all the specifications that you have been so assiduously working on. Every desire that we have is plugged into the design of the next body. And then once this dream is finished, then the next dream starts. So essentially speaking, it says, so the dream means that, so the very essence of the dream means that you have entered into a state of identification which is temporary. As we have talked about it many times, it is exactly like you are acting in a play. And you're very serious about it. You're doing a good job. It's not as though you're you are casual about it. No, you learn all the lines that you have to deliver. And the good actors, they practice exactly what their expressions will be, I suppose. And you do all the makeup. You look like a completely different person. You sound and you act as a completely different person while you are in that act. So the very nature of the dream is that you assume an identity which is temporary and is not you, is something else than other than you. The same principles apply in our waking life. So, as this is what we will study in a minute. So this is the situation that we find ourselves. So one can ask, in fact, as Swami Viditatmananda articulates it very well when he is discussing. Let's look at this verse now. Okay. Verse number 12. Sa eva maya parimohita atma. So let's look at the English translation of that. So, saha eva, he alone. Maya parimohita atma. One who is very well deluded by Maya. And what is Maya in a minute we will explain. Shariram asthaya, identified with the body. Karoti sarvam, does everything. What kind of things? Stri annapanadi vichitra bhogaihi. So stri here means sex. Sexual contact, sexual pleasure. Annapanadi, the pleasures of eating, food and drinking, etc. Different kind of experiences, sense organ experiences. Saha eva jagrat, waking state, paritriptim, full gratification, eti, it obtains. So the verse number 12 says, if I read the whole sentence, the self alone, very well deluded by Maya, is the one who, identified with the body, does all actions in the waking state and obtains full gratification or experiences through the various objects of pleasure such as sex, food, drink, etc. This is the meaning. So here, as Swami Viditatmananda now analyzes this by raising a question on page 148. He says that, as we also posed in the beginning of the class, that if one is a limitless Brahman, why does he feel a sense of limitation? In fact, if I am Ananda, happiness, how come I feel the lack of it? You say I am immortal, how come I feel the mortal being? If non-duality is my reality, how come I experience duality? So here, the question he raised is, why is it that I feel that way? So here, I think that there are a couple of different ways to look at it. One is that due to my what would be called spiritual infancy, non-maturity, I take my experience to be my knowledge. Due to my spiritual infancy, I am unable to distinguish between experience and knowledge. Very much like until a child becomes old enough, it takes the sunrise to be the truth. It takes some mature mind to grasp the fact that experiences are not the same as fact. Even though you may continue to see the sunrise as an experience, knowing fully well that the sun doesn't rise, it is the earth moving that makes it look like it is rising. Oftentimes you will see, for example, that if a train is moving and there is a train next to you, you don't know whether that train is moving or you are moving. You have to look around and then you say, oh, our train is moving. Sometimes it looks like the other train is moving. So such kind of differences between experiences and knowledge are possible. So one of the reasons why, even though I am immortal, I feel mortal, is that spiritually I am still an infant. I have the experience of mortality and I take the experience of mortality as a fact. This is what the Shastra says. There is a very famous verse which says, Avicharita siddham dvaitam. Dvaitam meaning, duality, or duality meaning immortality. Duality meaning that each room space is taken separately. You are different from me and so on. When in fact it's all the same space. I don't understand that. Until I understand it, it all looks different to me. So that differentiation called Dvaitam is avicharita siddham. It is established by non-thinking, through ignorance. Through ignorance. The name of that ignorance is Maya Shakti. Maya Shakti is really the ignorance that causes me not to understand what's going on. More on that in a minute. But here, so I mentioned that my mistake of taking myself to be mortal rather than immortal has two elements to it. One is that I am spiritually not mature enough. I haven't inquired into the fact that I just take the experiences to be fact, when in fact they are not. Even though the experience remains the same, but the knowledge is completely different. So this is one aspect of it. The other aspect of that is that I think that by this problem is a legitimate problem. The problem of finding joy is a legitimate problem and it requires a legitimate solution. And this is what we do in our life. We find that I have a problem and I find out how to get rid of that problem and I am engaging myself in solving that problem. This is what I do the whole life. Keeps coming back in one form or the other and I just keep trying to find solutions for it. Always with the hope that one day I will become very successful. My life will become very orderly. I'll be able to have enough money, enough friends, enough health, and I think I will live happily ever after. All have some kind of a dream like this. Has it ever happened? Doesn't. But I don't give up. I don't know what else to do. I keep working at it. It's fascinating. I see this, these on CNBC there are, so there are reports about these investors who are old investors. Have been investing for a long time, and they may have a lot of money, but until the last breath of their lives, they are still looking for some new investment. Fascinating. Selling, buying stock, buying companies, selling companies, investing in them, dividends, this, that, or the other. And these are people that may be a billionaire. And yet they are buying and selling and so on. It's very strange. Why would anybody do this? Must have some kind of a joy to feel accomplished even at that stage. So this is the situation. We keep on looking for legitimate answers, thinking that the problem of being happy is a legitimate problem. Vedanta says this is not going to happen. It's called anirvachaniyam. Maya Shakti is anirvachaniyam. You cannot find answers in the world because it is anirvachaniyam. Anirvachaniyam means that it is neither true nor untrue. It's hard to tell exactly what it is. It's somewhere in between. So it's not as though we don't know. Nirvachaniyam doesn't mean that we don't know what it is. No, that's not what is being said. We know that it cannot be precisely defined. So what do you mean by precisely defined? That is the very nature of mithya, as you know. That, for example, the gold in that example is a satyam. The lack of gold is asatyam, and a gold ornament is mithya. And mithya is something very peculiar, because you cannot say it is there, you cannot say it is not there, it is somewhere in between. What do you mean? How can you? We know that you cannot say it is not there because it is golden ornament. How come you say it is there? it assumes a temporary form of being there. Really it is not there, because what you see as an ornament is really gold. Gold is there, Satyam. But all ornamentation is mithya. So similarly here also we say that it's we are dealing with something which is anirvachaniyam, not precisely done. And really speaking, so you say, okay, let it be imprecise. So what? No, you cannot say that, because my quest in life is to become Satyam, precise and Satyam, not Mithya. This kind of like it is here today, gone tomorrow, this sort of a thing that's not acceptable to me. I should be Satyam, I should know who I am, Jnanam, and I should be very happy. Anantam, Anandam. This is what everybody wants. So, as Swami Viditatmananda points out, you cannot. The second one so remember the two things I mentioned. One is the spiritual infancy of not being able to tell an experience from truth. The second one is taking my experiences to be real and grappling with it as though it is real, when in fact it is not. So Swami Viditatmananda says that the problem can only be solved by recognizing that the very problem is illegitimate. Here the snake and rope example becomes very useful. You cannot deal with the snake because it is not there. You can only deal with the snake by recognizing that it is not really a snake, it is a rope. So, this is the situation. Now the question is, how is it that I have such a strong sense of being wrong? A strong sense of being what I am, even though it is wrong. How can that happen? As we talked about earlier, about some special factors that allow the waking state not to be looked at as a dream state. And so the special factors are my sense of identification with the character that I am in this life at this point is so strong that it will take a little while for me to become sober. Now I remember Swami Chinmayananji had given this example. So in the there is a custom in many of the smaller towns and villages that the students, they take bhang, which is like I guess it's kind of, I've never had bhang in my life, but it's like marijuana. And so there was a boy from a village who went to college, and his college classmates asked him to drink bhang. So at first he said, no, I don't want to take this. But they said, come on, this is all what we all do. And if I can interrupt that from my own, when I was in college, I still remember the time when our friends and I decided to drink beer. So we had gone to see a movie, and then in the movie maybe we had we went for dinner or something, but I'd never had beer before. Maybe I might have just tasted it and I don't like it. I didn't like it then and I still don't, that doesn't do. I was the only time, maybe a couple of times in my life, very early on, I'm very happy that it happened. I got so drunk that I really didn't know what was happening. The whole thing was spinning. I had to sit down. I could not stand by myself. And it was a very unpleasant experience for me. And I resolved there and then I will never drink to this extent. Never. And I haven't. I take that back. One other time that happened was that in one of my friend's engagement, the father of my friend's to-be wife, father of his father-in-law, who was going to be his father-in-law, was serving champagne to everyone. And I got so drunk by champagne. Both times, the beer and the champagne fooled me, thinking this is just not very much. But if you drink enough of it, you can lose your sense of being. So that happened again. Even though I had resolved after drinking beer, I'll never have it again. And if I take some, just take a sip here and there, that's okay. But I never really get drunk. Same thing happened on the on this party where this gentleman kept on refilling our champagne glass. After a while, I could not even get up. I still remember the whole party finished and I was not sober yet and I had to drive. So I had to sit there and drink some coffee and so on. Those are the only times, two times in my life, where I really felt inebriated. I have never done that again. Anyway, so in this story, this young man was given bhang by his friends. And pretty soon he started feeling strange, out of control, kind of like what I did. And he started acting, this is the story given by Swami Chinmanandaji, very important thing, very important story. So he started saying crazy things. What's happening to me? I want to go home. I want to go home. They said, no, you're okay. You're just, we're all together. He says, no, I want to go home. I don't want to be here. Pretty soon their friends got really afraid that this perhaps guy has had too much bhang. So they called up his parents and said, I'm very sorry to tell you, we were all having fun, but this guy just doesn't seem to tolerate it well and he wants to come home. Will you please come and get him? We are very sorry. We are asking. So his father said, okay, I will bring him, no problems. So his father came in and sat him in the car and he kept on babbling. I want to go home. I want to go home. So his father said, okay, it's all right. Just we'll be home in a few minutes. And then he put them down, he took him inside, put him on the bed, and he kept on babbling. I want to go home. I want to go home. So his father said, listen, son, you are at home. No, but I want to go home. I really want to go home. So his father also smiled and said, what is going to happen is that he will, it will wear off. It will wear off. Hopefully he can go to sleep. And then when he wakes up, the effect of the bhang would be over and he would realize he's already home. And so this is kind of like our situation, honestly speaking. Each one of us feels, I want to be home, I want to be free, I want to be free. So the Shastra says, you have had too much Maya. So the Maya is like bhang. It makes you feel very strange, just like in a dream also. This is the magic of Maya. The magic of Maya is that it makes you see something which is not true. So the answer to, I think is very interesting here, Swami Viditatmananda, on page 149, he says, what is Maya? Maya is a model. Maya means an illusion of magic. So in Sanskrit it is said, Ya ma sa Maya. One which is not there but appears to be there is called Maya. Sa ma. Ma means not there. Sa Maya. So like a magician, just like a magician that through the Maya Shakti creates a world of experiences. And so really speaking, everything seems to be what is, So he says, actionless self appears to be the agent of action. One who is free appears to be bound. This is the Maya. Inexplicable, indefinable, anirvachaniya. Yeah, some very nice language here, and I think you should please read it. So, now the Maya Shakti is analyzed to a certain extent. And it's interesting that the dream Shakti, the sleep rather, I would say the sleep is very much like Maya. Why? Because it hides the truth from yourself. So, again, I would say that the analysis of sleeping is a very powerful analysis. It is not just hiding things from yourself. If you want to just hide things for yourself, all you have to do is to just close your eyes or put your hand around your eyes. That's not a sleep. That's hiding. Sleep is something much more powerful because it has not only the power to hide, but to also create an alternative reality. This is what is called Avarana Shakti, which is hiding, and Vikshepa Shakti. Vikshepa in Sanskrit means to throw, to project. It has that ability. So in some sense, the sleep as a power given to human beings is a subset of the Maya Shakti which confounds everyone in the whole world to be falsely identified, hiding their own ability of who they are. This is the Maya Shakti. So here in verse number 12, so this is actually, you remember in the last class we had gone into the name Om, and we had mentioned that the word Om is the most accurate name for Ishvara, God. Why is it accurate name? Because it accurately and completely encapsulates the essence of each human being, of everything. And the essence of human being is the three states of experiences that are mutually exclusive to each other. Three states of experiences, which is waking state, dream state, and deep sleep state, that mutually exclude each other, but not the underlying consciousness that is essential to all three of them. You see, the underlying essence of all three states remains the same, but each state makes the other state go away for a while. So we have talked about this analogy, that it is like an actor that plays three roles simultaneously. He goes to a movie number 1 in the morning, movie number 2 in the afternoon, and movie number 3 in the evening. Same actor. But in the movie, the appearance and the acting and the role are totally different from each other. But the actor remains the same. This is our situation. This is what we have to really look into and grasp the truth of it. That each one of us is the basic consciousness, the conscious entity, which is never changing. But in the waking state, our sense of identification makes us like a waker, and that mutually excludes my identification as a dreamer and my identification as a deep sleeper. Those are really states of identification, kind of like roles that we play. Right? So this is what is being pointed out. So in verse number 12, the movie of the waking state is pointed out. Waking state is pointed out. So here, why is the waking state? Because of the word shariram asthaya. So he says, Saha eva maya parimohita atma, deluded by the sense of identification by the Maya Shakti, Shariram asthaya karoti sarvam. So as a person identified with a sthula sharira, gross body, full of bones and blood and skin, that body associated with it, this is me. And so, for example, for me to enjoy food or sex or music or other things, I see myself as this body. I work through this body. I enliven this body. So this is kind of like an appliance, and that appliance then interacts with things. And so in this state, my identification is total. So essentially we have three bodies that each one of us is associated with. So one is the causal body, which is the Maya Shakti itself. We have the ability to not know something. And as a result of not knowing something, projecting an alternative reality. So this is the causal body, if you want to call it a body. It is not really not a tangible body, it's an intangible body, but still very much there. Our ability to not be able to understand anything, to be able to sleep, is all because of the causal body. So this is number one. The second one is Sukshma Sharira, which is the subtle body. Subtle body also means that it has forms, but not something you can really grasp and hang on to. Thoughts, aspirations, desires, disappointments, a sense of well-being. All those thoughts. And then jealousy, fear. Drigdirsya Viveka points about Hir, Bhir, Tyevam Adim. All these various shades of it. It's the mind, it's the Sukshma Sharira. And then we have the Sthula Sharira, which is a gross body that has its own characteristics. So it has all these six so-called Shadvikara, 6 different vikaras. It is born, it is visible, then it grows, then there is a metamorphosis, vardhate, viparinamate, then apakshiyate, then it starts to become mature, and the hair become white, grey, and then vinashyati, it goes, it just disappears. And so this has a slower but a longer definiteness about it. This is the Sthula Sharira. So in the waking state, through the Maya Shakti, I am associated with the very strong identification with Sthula Sharira, Sukshma Sharira, and Karana Sharira. right? So this is the one of the three states of experiences which is talked about in verse number 12, right? So I think I will stop at this because we will look at verse number 13, which now goes into the second state of experience, which is the dream. We've talked about dream quite a bit, so I won't spend as much time on it. We already have a good background on it, but it does have certain things that we should talk about. So we will do that in the next class. And so this is how, and at the end of this you will see that all these three states, which the third state being the deep sleep, complete the picture of the creation by God and creation of the being. And the word Om with A, U, Ma encapsulates all three experiences, and because of that it is a complete enumeration and therefore the most accurate name for God or creation or Ishvara, whatever you may call it. So this is how we will complete the whole thing. So with that, let me close the class today to see if you have any questions, and we will continue next week. Om Asatoma Satgamaya Tamasoma Jyotirgamaya Mrityorma Amritam Gamaya. Om Purnamadav Purnamidam Purnat Purnamudachyate Purnasya Purnamadaya Purnamevavashishyate. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Harihi Om. Shri Gurubhyo Namaha. Harihi Om. Wow, Shanti Kumar, this is your third class in a row. You said you had a class on Yoga Vashishta, and then you were there with the Brahma Sutra, and now this one. Don't know how you do that. Amazing. Very good. Good to see you all. I don't see any questions per se. I'll just wait for a minute or see. And then if not, then we will close the class. So I don't see any questions per se. So hopefully I'll see you next week. Om Hari Om.